BlackRock, the organization that controls the world.
An evil plan executed in the dark.
A company that doesn't stop growing and gaining more and more influence. That's at least what YouTube videos like this suggest. Or videos like this. Even valuetainment is jumping on the trend. But luckily, there are channels that bring some objectivity to it all. Plain Bagel is a pretty good reference. BlackRock has stopped growing for quite a long time. You can't see this on the US dollar chart, but this is what we do on this channel. We look at relative valuations. Is BlackRock really becoming an ever-growing part of the stock market? This here is a BlackRock chart. So is this chart. This is also a BlackRock chart. This is the BlackRock price divided by the S&P 500, by the overall index. How is BlackRock doing relative to the rest of the stock market? And this is not growing since 2008. For the last roughly 15 years, BlackRock didn't gain any additional influence, at least in terms of market cap. If anything, you wanted to be in BlackRock since the beginning of the millennium, for the 8 years from 2000 to 2008. That's when BlackRock outperformed the S&P 500 by more than 1,300%. BlackRock is really just now managing the funds. They're not anymore growing. They're not really becoming more important. If you're now criticizing BlackRock, you should have already started with this 15 years ago. That's when BlackRock was the same size. But the following here is really interesting. What happened to BlackRock didn't just happen to BlackRock. It also happened to Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's holding company. When an asset manager becomes too big, it's incredibly hard to generate outsized performance. If you want to generate alpha, you have to be in small and inefficient markets. The bigger the markets get, the more asset under management you have, the harder it is to find inefficiencies. This here is a long-term Berkshire Hathaway chart starting in 1980, so 43 years of data. But again, this is the US dollar chart having all the inflation in there. This is the Berkshire Hathaway chart denominated in the S&P 500. Again, zero growth in the last 15 years since 2008. Berkshire Hathaway is pretty much just going side by side with the S&P 500. And here comes the important part. The S&P 500 underperformed technology stocks over that long period. So let's say you take Berkshire Hathaway and you divide it, instead of by the S&P 500, by the NASDAQ, you see a very different chart. Remember that 2008 mark that we talked about? Berkshire Hathaway underperformed technology stocks by almost 60% since then. This is BlackRock relative to the NASDAQ. Since 2009, an underperformance of 65%. So who's gaining control of the world here? It's not Larry Fink, it's Larry Page. The Googles and Microsofts of this world, they have more and more say in the economy. BlackRock is just holding assets. BlackRock just has a bit of voting rights, usually minority voting rights in a lot of companies, but still very diversified. There is of course the questionable ESG agenda, but how often can they really move the needle? Big tech, on the other hand, is way more autonomous. They can really move the world. When Google decides to rank your website lower and to rank their own product higher in the search results, or when they decide to show a certain video over another one, they have real impact on the real economy. Google is not just an objective, neutral data processor, data provider. Google has influence. If Google, for instance, decides not to show videos that are critical of the COVID vaccine, well then you don't see much about it. If Facebook decides to label certain news as fake, when in the end they turn out correct, then that's a big influence. It's probably a much bigger influence than what BlackRock has. BlackRock's power is dwindling. Most of BlackRock's assets under management are simply just passive. They simply just replicate the index. There aren't that many actively managed funds where BlackRock decides here is where the capital goes. And the voting, even though present in many companies, is mainly minority. Minority votes that won't change the course of any company. Don't fall victim to sensationalism. Instead, join our Telegram, link is down below.